Hey, it's Mike here, and today a good old-fashioned response video to Isaac Butterfield, straight up hating on vegans, and in particular hating on a smaller vegan creator, Jade for Justice.
Ladies and gentlemen, everybody hates vegans. That is a world-renowned truth. But I think that I have found the worst of the worst.
Again, as somebody that identifies as a comedian, you never really know if they mean what they say, but I think it's gotten to the point where he's generally meaning what he says. This is his belief system of being just very anti-vegan, and in particular responding to sort of ethical principles that Jade puts out there. He tries to dismiss the ethical claims, then makes some interesting claims around testosterone and things like that that I just need to respond to with some science. And I do feel throughout this video that I'm watching somebody's almost like therapy session or rant to just feel better about themselves.
The vegan argument that they want to save animals and stuff is just it's just a lie. And it's a lie they tell themselves.
And there's actually one area where we agree really hard, so stay tuned for that. Either way, let's have some fun and weigh in. Let's just go.
They're bad people with terrible ideas and just awful opinions.
Yeah, vegans are bad people with terrible ideas. And I know, again, he's joking, but I'm gonna just take some of the things he says literally because why not? It's more fun that way. So if all vegans are bad people, then you're telling me that people like Caitlin, who runs Rancho Relaxo, all these people who run these animal sanctuaries are literally like among the sweetest people that I've ever met on earth. Yeah, they're all just bad and that they should just shut up. I'll get to the shut up topic in a little bit, but he gets onto Jade and her accounts.
The worst vegan with the worst opinion that you have ever heard.
He calls Jade, who I know a little bit from some brief communication, the worst of the worst, which again is hyperbole clearly, but it's kind of wild that somebody with over 2 million subscribers has to like pick on and hate on this smaller, 5,000 or 6,000 follower account. But this is where I will say people seem to be less excited to watch the vegan hate videos because, again, with 2 million subscribers, after this video has been out for a few weeks, it only has about 40,000 views, but in his case, 49 out of 50 of his subscribers were like, no, I'm not actually gonna click on and watch that, which I think is striking. Like, I think in the past, the let's hate on vegans button has just been a surefire way to get a high viewed video, but now maybe people are getting a little bit over it. So the thing about creators like Jade is that they're just trying to get people to stop hurting animals. They're trying to say different things, and some things get attention and some don't, and she touches on the sort of abuse of younger individuals. You get my drift. And that as an analogy for animal abuse.
Not being vegan is like being a child abuser. I'm gonna keep on eating animals and that's my personal choice. That's fine, that's your personal choice. I'm gonna keep on assaulting children and that's my personal choice.
And he responds by saying this.
You actually think that the worst thing that could happen to a child or a parent is exactly the same as an animal, a meat eater, us, eating meat, doing what we were built to do. That's just fucking gross.
But she's obviously taking the classic excuse of it's my personal choice that we see all the time and showing why it doesn't hold up logically. Notice how he said it's exactly the same thing.
Is exactly the same.
I don't think that Jade in that analogy was equating, so we have to get again to the topic of comparing versus equating. It doesn't mean it's necessarily the exact same thing, and even if Jade did view it as the exact same thing, not everybody has to view it as a bad thing that they should not do. But it justifies what we do to animals in terms of killing them and eating them as something that we were quote unquote built to do. It's crazy how we're just still railing on that appeal to nature over and over and over and over again. We did this in the past, we were meant to do this, our anatomy means that we should do this as a reason to harm animals when it's very clear that people don't have to do that to survive today. It's been 15 going on 16 years for me, and I'm still here. And my blood work looks great. And it's also wild to me that people subscribe so aggressively to the appeal to nature in the realm of meat, but ignore it in every other way possible. Like I've said a million times before, that they use a toilet when they should be squatting in the woods, or that they're using modern medical equipment that is sterilized and stainless steel. They should just go, no, we weren't built to have modern medicine, so I just reject it all. Like, no, they would obviously think that was insane. But since this instance of appealing to nature appeals to them, they're like, oh yeah, give me more of that. And now we can get on to a topic that I have not really talked about on this channel, and that is using the term trafficking in the realm of animal exploitation. Here is Jade.
A form of trafficking that doesn't get talked about enough is purchasing a piece of meat or a dead individual. Trafficking is the buying, selling, or trading of individuals for exploitation, so this is a form of trafficking.
Okay, buying meat is not trafficking, you f***. Vegans like her do this because this is how they were enveloped by the cult. The cult puts things out there that's unbelievable, that's crazy, that draws you in. It's like clickbait.
So he just outright denies this, calls her crazy, just ad hominem instead of actually responding to it. But I think it's a very valid claim, especially when you're looking at trafficking in general. It includes drugs, it includes humans. Well, it's a little bit hard to nail down an exact definition. In general, it's talking about moving either a good or a living being, in that case a human, for human trafficking, and exploiting them and coercing them and using them, and that is exactly what we're doing with animals. Perhaps a nuance here is that trafficking is often considered illegal, but if we're moving dog corpses around for dog meat, that would be considered trafficking, but the exact same thing, the exact same industry for a pig would not be considered trafficking under that. But it's very obvious that the law is not the end-all to beat-all ethical standard there. For example, the slave trade was completely legal, but trafficking, and I threw together this graphic to compare the transatlantic slave ships with livestock ships, something I haven't seen done before, but the parallel is uncanny. So I do think trafficking is a useful term, especially if there are people who are really into stopping human trafficking or drug trafficking, and then maybe realizing that there's a lot of parallels. This video is covering some slightly heavier topics, and speaking of heavy metals, I recently covered lead, and some of you guys asked how to lower your lead exposure even more. One area that I didn't cover at all in that video is from drinking water, which brings me to Cove Pure's tabletop reverse osmosis filter, which is today's sponsor. So right off the bat, a couple things I like about this design: really quick pitcher that you can just pour water into. You don't have to wait for anything to filter, but then you can also get some crispy cool water directly from the dispenser, or some hot water so that you can make ramen or whatever little quick food items you have. And then, of course, this thing gets out up to 99.9% of impurities. That is the main reason that I'm all about this thing. And that brings us back to lead. Of course, we have neurological concerns and reproductive concerns. And from the EPA, drinking water can make up 20% or more of a person's total exposure to lead. And that depends on where you are in the US. Here's a map which can give you a hint on your risk there. And so getting that out is huge. And then in terms of other reproductive issues, we also have the endocrine disruptors known as PFAS, those forever chemicals, which this also removes, which is great. And fun fact, my last official job before YouTube was actually working at a water filtration company. So this is something I'm pretty passionate about. So yeah, getting a filter is great. And if you would like to try Cove Pure, you can just click that QR code right on the screen, or you can go to covepure.com/MikeTheVegan to get $200 off. All right. Then we get into his claim that every vegan always brings up Dominion.
One, I think, is Dominion. Every single vegan will mention Dominion. That's how they became vegan. And what Dominion is a compilation, basically, of horrendous things that people have seen or videotaped, and evidence of animal cruelty in factory farms. Now, factory farming is horrendous, and we should not do it. It shouldn't be a thing. Unfortunately, it is currently. We should find a way around that. Veganism is not the way around that, not even slightly.
Factory farming is an industry where you pay to consume animals. Being vegan is where you stop paying to consume animals and their products. How is that not a way around that? It's so obviously a way around that. If everybody went vegan overnight, factory farming would not exist in a few weeks or whenever it can finally phase out.
But we should find a way to be able to cultivate the meat that we require as human beings that doesn't allow animals to suffer.
Oh, cultivating meat. Is he talking about that lab-grown meat that would not require animal suffering? You can just pluck a single chicken feather and take those mesenchymal adult stem cells and then indefinitely produce meat through a plant-based growth medium? No? He's not talking about that?
Maybe thinking, hang on, how could you possibly end the life of something, an animal, to eat, with it being humane? And I'll tell you why. Because all animals, every single animal that you love, that you don't even know, that you've never seen, exists in a very simple plane. They're born, they breed, they die.
I'm going to interrupt him halfway through that thought and say, I need to correct him in that it is we breed them, then they're born, and then some of them are bred, most of them are probably not, they're just used for whatever reason, and then they die. So yeah, we are bringing these animals into existence and then putting them into a suffering position. They don't just magically exist already. Anyway, here he goes.
They should live in the wild. They should breed, and then when they're like, it depends on the animal obviously, 10, 12, 15, 20 years old, they die, even young. A lot of animals will actually just starve to death. What's more humane? The right thing to do as human beings is to stop animal suffering, right? So should we end the lives of animals before they get to that point? that's an argument. Maybe we should. Maybe we should stop all the suffering. And we end it with an instant with a rifle or a bow, and boom, done. They're gone. No suffering. None. And we eat the meat. That's much better than factory farming.
So he says that because there's a lot of suffering in wild animal deaths, that we should be killing these animals with bows and rifles, which first of all, say he's appealing to nirvana in that all of the animals could be wild and free, which we'll get to why they can't be in a second, but not to get too gruesome, but people miss. And when they miss, it gets ugly and there's a lot of animal suffering as well. But now we can get to the math, and that is pretty well illustrated from this chart of wild mammal biomass versus the farmed mammal biomass. Wild animals are eclipsed by a factor of about 25. So how are you supposed to meet the demand that we have now for meat with the amount of biomass of wild animals? Yeah, if we could perfectly round up all wild mammals to replace mammal meat, we would probably hunt them to extinction in just a few weeks. And I will say thanks to Ryan of Happy Healthy Vegan for covering this, because he really distilled his ethical argument for just killing all of these animals, putting them out of their misery. Here he is.
The argument that Isaac Butterfield just gave, so that all animals should be killed. Premise 1, humans ought stop animal suffering, meaning we have some kind of moral obligation to stop animal suffering. Premise 2, animals suffer, as you said, from disease, starvation, and predation. Premise 3, animals can no longer suffer when they are dead. Yes, that's indeed what he said. So the conclusion is, humans ought to kill animals to stop them from suffering.
He goes on to say that vegans are completely hypocritical because they don't care about all animals equally, and they choose a cow's life over the harvest deaths of insects, etc.
Well, how about all the thousands of bugs that you don't give about, all the mice that you couldn't give a rat's about? See what I did there? Very good. That, ladies and gentlemen, is hypocrisy. These people pick and choose what animal they need to care about.
And to that I would have to say, Isaac, you have a cow to your left and you have a fly to your right. Which one of those, if you have to press a button and kill, would you kill? Give you as much time as you need. And he's appealing to nirvana, so let me appeal to nirvana then in response, in that if we had vegans who were in charge of farming, they would be lowering the harvest deaths and the pesticide use as much as is possible to lower the total amount of deaths. Anyway, let's talk about a different instance of speciesism, which is much more obvious, and that is people who eat meat and how they care about certain animals that are so similar to other animals that they don't care about at all. For example, dogs versus pigs. No, two mammals, roughly the same size. The one that they eat is actually smarter. And yet, if Jade was making any of these arguments just about saving dogs from consumption for meat in Asia, he would agree with her 100% in pretty much everything she says. Using the term trafficking for the dog meat industry, he'd probably be totally fine with that. And something tells me he would not be making the harvest deaths argument as an excuse for those people to eat their dog meat. Think about all the ants and mice that were killed just so you could eat one dingo. He's not gonna make that argument. He actually says the quiet part out loud here about how he really doesn't care.
And the response to that argument often is, oh, well, most of those crops are just for other animals to eat, so you can then eat them down the track. And I was like, yeah, okay, I understand that argument. But what you must understand is I don't give a shit about crop deaths. I'm talking about you.
But then we move on to the topic that, I love to talk about, and that is health in the realm of testosterone and masculinity. Here he is.
A great way to develop more testosterone in your life is to consume something that's been demonized for a long time. Cholesterol in eggs and meat and all that type of That's why you see vegan men walking around looking like they are 14 minutes away from having their gender reveal party.
So somewhere along the line on some bro podcast, he heard that you need cholesterol to make testosterone. Maybe it was Andrew Huberman, who knows who it was. But he implies that without having dietary cholesterol, which vegans do not have, which thankfully keeps their LDL or bad cholesterol quite low, or at least helps with it, then you're not gonna be able to make testosterone and you're gonna be feminized. But it doesn't appear to look at the research, and the best research we have on this shows that vegans not only have equivalent free levels of testosterone, they had higher levels of total testosterone in vegan men from this study. So this really is a claim without any merit, and then he just tries to anecdotally reinforce his personal beliefs that already existed by saying that they're all about to have some gender reveal party. But I can't help but think to a somewhat recent protest I was at, where this guy came up, was in San Diego, and he was like, oh, veganism is gonna make your health bad. And then he got ushered away 3 or 4 super jacked vegans that made him really physically not look good. And I was like, dang, there's so many buff vegan dudes now. Not that you have to be some perfect masculinity archetype to be vegan. You can just be a person that exists. But I think it's funny how people seem to never notice those people. They have like the blinders on for all of the vegan bodybuilders, all the jacked people that would, you know, probably make Isaac look like a soy boy. I personally don't care about this stuff, but I know a lot of dudes are really caught up on their masculinity, really insecure. So I guess I have to, respond to that. Anyway, one area where I think vegans are winning is helping to create an image of cow's milk consumption as weird. And especially with these oat milks coming out that are just, in my opinion, more delicious, more smooth. They don't have that like mammalian, fleshy, grassy taste to them like cow's milk. And he actually doesn't seem to support milk drinking.
Because milking someone without consent is molesting them.
Is that molesting someone? I guess it is, hypothetically. If you see a pregnant lady and run over and squeeze a teat, that's sexual assault, right? I guess it depends why you're squeezing the teat of another animal. If you're just going around like nipple crippling cows, then that's not okay. You should be charged. But if you're harvesting the milk, even though I don't drink milk, and I think it's weird how many people drink milk. Like if you're watching this channel and you go to the fridge regularly and drink plain milk, like plain cow's milk, what are you doing?
He appears to think that it is weird, and I agree with him. However, he probably thinks the moment it's coagulated or fermented into cheese or frozen into ice cream that it's totally okay. Anyway, moving on.
It really goes after the lonely people, the weak people, the people who are desperate to belong to something.
So he thinks it's lonely, weak, desperate people that go vegan, and I would have to argue that he's completely wrong. And from an ethical perspective, I think it's people who have actually witnessed suffering, exploitation. And there's a reason that more people of color are vegan, their proportions are higher, because they're able to see, hey, there's exploitation there. I know what that's like, or hey, there's abuse there. I know what that's like, and I want to stop it. And so that's what they do. And that they're actually not weak. These are strong people because they're able to go completely against the grain of society. People constantly talking crap about them, saying,
ladies and gentlemen, everybody hates vegans. That is a world-renowned truth.
That's what you have to go up against every single day just because you want to harm animals less. And then it gets really interesting for me because he almost said something that one of my previous videos was completely about, is that there's maybe too much happening in the world right now for a lot of people to care about the topic of veganism, ethically especially.
The amount of that's going on in the world right now, and that's what you're concerned with? You, Jade.
But it's a total cop-out to just say there are bad things happening in the world, therefore your issue is meaningless. And again, I think you can better understand this through the perspective of saving dogs. Would he go up to somebody at a dog rescue shelter and say, stop what you're doing, shut up, there's no reason for you to be doing this, there's so much bad going on in the world right now, and you just care about these stupid animals? And then he goes up to one of those dogs with the little wheelchair rollies, and then he just kicks them? No, obviously he's not gonna wanna do that, but I think he just can't make that connection that people could care the same way about other animals as he probably cares about dogs. Watch him just hate dogs, and none of these points are gonna land. And then we get onto a topic that I've been meaning to do a whole video on, so maybe I'll just briefly respond, and that's, why do vegans wanna eat things that are shaped like dead animals?
Why do vegans eat food that's shaped like meat?
That's a fair question. Why do vegans eat foods that are shaped like meat? Okay, the way I look at vegans who buy and eat things that are shaped like meat, that taste like meat, that are named after meat, is this. It's exactly the same as buying a particular doll that's made for adult use and it being, you know, the size of a child.
And this is where first I will say that we take those dead animals and oftentimes we shape them into fruit or things like fruit. For example, meatballs almost looks like a small little rambutan or something, and we have these little drumsticks which almost look like a pear. And really that we go to such great lengths to take that original animal and forget that people are eating an animal. So much so that you have to tell children sometimes that they're eating animals and then they start crying.
But I don't want to eat them ever again. Because they're animals and I like animals.
Like, I remember eating a chicken leg when I was little. I think it was Wendy's, and then I got a little vein in it that bled, and I was like, oh my gosh, and I didn't eat chicken like that for quite a long time until I forgot about it because I was just a kid. But then the other obvious answer here is that people who are vegan for almost their entire life have been eating these types of foods, not because they're a dead animal, but because they were fed to them and because their tastes adapted to them. And so they're gonna wanna include those tastes and textures which oftentimes are from like herbs like sage.
To do this whole vegan diet without sounding like a whinging, whining, and that is to just shut the up about it, okay? Just shut the up. Just eat your veggies, kiss your cows, and go the to sleep, you fucking tired.
So he goes and says that vegans should just shut up. And I think this is such an interesting idea because these are the type of guys who are all like, oh, free speech is the best thing in the world, but if it's something I don't want you talking about, you should just shut up. It's just never gonna work to tell somebody to shut up, especially about what they're like passionately doing activism about, but he just wants them to be quiet so he doesn't need to think about what he's doing, which clearly there's a victim to his food choices, and that bothers him because why else would he really care about these people? And why would he need to respond to Jade and other vegans in the past? So yeah, in the end, unfortunately, vegans are disliked. However, they are not all bad people. A lot of them are amazing people, super empathetic people that just basically dedicate their whole life to taking care of animals. And no, vegans do not have lower levels of testosterone. If anything, their total testosterone is higher. Again, free levels are the same. And I do agree with him that drinking milk from a cow is weird, and we could easily just stop doing that. And as we're just moving our entire animal-based food supply to wild animals that are shot to prevent suffering, there's obviously just so much wrong with that. I don't even think it's an idea worth taking seriously other than just the general idea of people thinking that hunting can replace all food. The math does not work. Anyway, let me know down below what you think about all this. It was an 18-minute video, so I couldn't respond to everything. It's like every minute that I respond to balloons into like 3 or 4 minutes. So, you know, I gotta just pick and choose. And of course, if you would like to get some super fresh, crispy water, I don't know what I'm talking about, you can just use the QR code on screen or click that link below. Go to covepeer.com/MikeTheVegan for $200 off. Again, just feel free to like, subscribe, all that good stuff, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.